Hello, everyone, and welcome. Now, where I left off last time, the war had formally basically started, but it was still really hazy how this war was going to be fought, who was going to be on what side. And we're going to see today, kind of by the end of this, the resolution of some of those questions, but the opening of some larger questions. Some questions I would even argue we're still answering to this very day, believe it or not. Okay, so that Second Continental Congress, I mentioned that last time, that the first one had met in 1774 and had tried to do a few minor things and said, well, let's check back and see where we're at in 1775. And a lot of them had no expectation that there would be actual armed conflict by that point. So that Second Continental Congress is going to meet 3 weeks after the Lexington and Concord incidents happened in Massachusetts. They're going to meet in Philadelphia. Okay. Naturally, their very first issue is defense. Everything else is going to have to take a backseat to that because they're facing an actual fully armed conflict with the British. So naturally, defense is going to be the first thing on their minds. And what happens is kind of that Second Continental Congress representing all the colonies are going to adopt basically all those militia armies that surround Boston in particular, because they're the kind of most I wouldn't even use the term battle hardened because they hadn't really been in any kind of serious battle. But the ones who are most willing to fight, most ready to fight, they're going to kind of adopt that militia army and call it the Continental Army. Okay, and quite easily, and I can't remember if it was exactly unanimously, but it was quite easily chosen. June 15th of 1775, while they were meeting, Congress selects George Washington as their chief commander. Again, he made perfect sense. He was that hero during the French and Indian War. His battle record wasn't the best, but he never gave up. He never backed down. He always kept getting up and fighting. So everybody's like, okay, it makes sense. George Washington would be chosen as the chief commander of this new Continental Army. Okay. So what happens next is the British, they're naturally peeved. They send reinforcements that then land in Boston, many more than they had had fled to the city and been captured. Send in a lot of reinforcements, seize the hills north of the city. And the militia there is going to respond after advance warning. So they kind of have a tip off, and militia is going to get there in time. Okay. June 16th of 1775, those militias dig deep into Breed's Hill, which is near Bunker Hill, and begin constructing a fort at the top. They realize that they need kind of a strong fort before this battle is going to happen. Okay. General Gage, he then sends 2,200 troops to take that fort. Okay. And very famously, one of the kind of commanders there for the Continental Army is a guy by the name of William Prescott. And he utters the very famous words, "Don't fire until you see the whites of their eyes." Okay. What is he talking about with that? Well, again, they didn't have a lot of ammunition to spare, the colonists. Okay. They, compared to the British, they were most certainly going to be outnumbered, but even also out ammunition. The British are going to have more ammunition than them. So they're working on lower supplies of that. So they're basically saying, have your musket ready. Do not shoot them until you see the whites of their eyes, which means they're extremely close. Like, I don't even know if you can see the whites of my eyes right now. Okay, I mean, it's pretty far away. So basically that's a way to conserve ammunition because they don't want to, the muskets were very kind of inaccurate compared to today's weaponry, right? So you had to kind of be a really good shot to shoot somebody, which meant that let them get really close before you fire because we can't waste ammunition, okay? So really that comes down to seeing the British within 50 yards, which is still pretty close, okay? And they're gonna halt some advances and be successful early on, but then as they feared, they are gonna run out of ammunition, okay? And the British are going to take that position at Bunker Hill, okay? So while Bunker Hill is a loss on paper, they did end up killing and injuring a good amount of British troops, the colonists, that is. The British are going to suffer over 1,000 casualties. So while they took the position, it was a costly victory for Britain, okay? And not only that, it almost works to kind of as be a little bit of a morale booster for the colonists, right? That, hey, we were outmanned and outmaneuvered, but we held our position for a long time and made it competitive. We held our ground for a long period of time. So again, loss on paper for the colonists. The British did take the position, but they suffer 1,000 casualties as a result. That's combining dead and wounded. Okay. Anytime you see casualties, that's kind of combining those numbers. So a costly victory for Britain while also raising the spirits a little bit for the Americans. Okay, but we're going to see you can't keep fighting the whole war like that. At some point, you're going to actually have some kind of key concrete wins. But on paper, Bunker Hill is going to be a victory for the British. Okay, so some other struggles. Again, as you can imagine, the colonies are largely unprepared. They don't have really the fighting force, the manpower, the supplies, or nearly the cooperation that the British have. And that's going to be a lot of the growing pains of these colonies, is thinking of themselves as one larger unit. Again, they mostly thought of themselves as local, maybe even a colony, but they really started to, they needed to come together as all across the America if they had any chance of defeating the British. And again, that's going to take some time for them to do. Okay. The Second Continental Congress then wants to self-govern, but again, there's still, some of them are still torn about leaving the British Empire. They've only ever known a life under the British rule and British Empire. So again, it's a big step for many of them to take. Okay. But by 1776, as the year goes on, as 75 goes on, and going into 76, those patriotic leaders are getting more and more loud, more and more influential, and they're going to start calling for an outright independence, okay? So the Continental Congress has some goals and accomplishments that it achieves during this time. They tried to negotiate with Native Americans, okay? The Native Americans, once again, they're like, this is a white man's war. We don't really know what we have to gain from it, but also many of them are thinking about the future and thinking, well, do we want to back the British? Last time they won, right? Or do we want to back this new American thing? So they're going to try to negotiate with them, as you could expect as well. Some Native Americans go with the British, some go with Americans, and even more are going to be kind of just sitting it out and don't want to really participate. Okay. Continental Congress also does establish a postal system, a postal service, a continental navy. That was a big step. I know John Adams in particular was adamant that we need a navy to take on the British. And that was also naturally a scary proposition because the British Navy, best in the world by a good amount at this point, but we still need some semblance of a navy if we're going to have any chance of defeating them, as well as the first iteration of the Marine Corps. Okay. So in March of 1776, that Continental Army had raided the Bahamas and even seized some British merchant ships. So while that, the British Navy, best in the world, they're capable of losing too, and we get a victory in the Bahamas and seizing some of their ships. So that's not only a morale booster, an actual victory against the British. Okay, so again, Continental Congress, they did have some goals and accomplishments, I would say, that are going to be key to really not only just kind of fighting the British, but setting the standards for a future United States. Okay. But again, some in the Continental Congress are still not totally sure about breaking away. Okay. And the Olive Branch Petition is going to be written in 1775 following that siege of Boston. Okay. And this is going to be written by John Dickinson. Okay. He's kind of a loyalist here in the Americas. He sends this over to King George III. If you know anything about an olive branch, it's kind of a sign of peace, that we want peace. And Dickinson says, listen, some colonies were still loyal, and hey, please call off hostilities. We can end this situation peacefully. Okay. Dickinson, by some patriots here in America, is going to be vilified for this. How dare you? You're an American. You should be standing on our side. Here you are trying to convert and to, side with the British. And then even some loyalists kind of didn't really love Dickinson, that he should have been more loyal to the king and that he should have been more forgiving of the king. But at that same time, radical delegates are ordering an attack on Quebec in an attempt to try and get France to side with them. They think, okay, maybe we can get France to jump in and help us out. Okay. They will capture Montreal, but are going to not really get far enough to take Quebec. Okay. So, as you can imagine, the king is going to see this Olive Branch Petition as disingenuous, okay? Yeah, Dickinson, you sent over this kind of a letter trying to get me on your side, but then on the other hand, there's these other Americans who are actually taking military action against us in Quebec, in the provinces of Canada, okay? So he says, no, you know what? The colonies are in open rebellion. I'm not going to kind of give in to these colonist demands because, as old Willy Wonka is saying here, you seriously thought that would work? And the king's confused because he's like, well, you're trying to say one thing, but then these other colonists are doing the other thing. So, no, I'm not taking your bait on this. Okay. So, this really was the point of no return. Okay. Especially when various militias are sprouting up all across the colonies and winning key morale boosters in Virginia, as you can imagine. Also, North Carolina, here in North Carolina, Pender County, which is close to the coast in Wilmington. Okay. South Carolina, Charlestown, through late 1775, going into early 1776. Okay. So this is really the last straw for Britain. I feel like I've said there's the last straw here, there, everywhere. But this is going to be really the biggest one at this point. Okay. Because Britain is going to pass the Prohibitory Act in December of 1775, which effectively is going to shut down all trade in the colonies and say, hey, no, we're not sending you anything new. We're going to order a full naval blockade around the colonies. And not only that, the British are going to start hiring Hessian or German. Germany is not one united country at this point. There's German provinces, basically. But basically, German or Hessian mercenaries on their side. So it shows that the British are getting more and more prepared to fight a serious war. Okay. As all this is going on, kind of very shortly after the Prohibitory Act, Thomas Paine is going to pen a very important pamphlet known as Common Sense. And here's Thomas Paine. And this is as a work of propaganda and as a work of kind of galvanizing the colonists. There's really nothing like common sense. This is really the thing that's going to get a lot of people on the fence, maybe some who are tending to be more loyalists. This is going to convince a lot of them to know we need to join the patriotic side. Because Paine very successfully reframes the king, not Parliament, as the enemy. He says, no, let's not worry as much about Parliament. It's this one guy. It's the king, King George III. He's our problem. He's the one who's inflicting all of these taxes on us. He's the one that's kind of sending these troops here to kill our boys, okay? So this pamphlet is going to be widely popular throughout the colonies. Sells over 100,000 copies, which was big numbers back then, okay? And is going to influence more and more of those provincial congresses to push for independence. As I said, for the most part, a lot we're still on the fence. This is going to be a turning point and going to convince many more to abandon the loyalist side or the moderate side and join a more patriotic side. But not everyone. There's still going to be some who are going to kind of, be more prone to be on that more kind of loyalist side. But this does start to convince more and more. Okay. So kind of in the early summer of 1776, a committee kind of created by the Second Continental Congress is going to be composed of a lot of heavy hitters, in many ways kind of who's who of the political philosophers of the day. Okay. John Adams, future president. Benjamin Franklin, he won't be president, but we've already talked about his influence, that Albany planned a union and other things, right? Roger Sherman, Robert Livingston, and I would say the most influential and important of all, the chief writer, the architect of this declaration, and third president of the United States, Thomas Jefferson. Okay, so they they all kind of collaborate on the ideas of what this Declaration of Independence is going to be, because I'll frame it this way. This is basically a big breakup text between us and Britain, right? We're breaking up with Britain. We're very decisively saying we're changing things up. So this is, if you want to think about, you're trying to compose the perfect breakup text, you kind of try to find the best writers in your life to help you with that, right? And so this is the document that very formally introduces these colonies as something new, something different, something we all recognize here now in 2020. Wouldn't even recognize it in some ways because it's so ingrained in our identity of who we are as Americans. What is that? The United States of America. First time this is really kind of thrown out there in a big way, because it's saying, no, we're no longer colonies of Britain. We're going to be individual states within this larger concept of what America could be. Okay, so there's kind of some confusion about some of the dates with the Declaration. It's kind of formally kind of voted on actually on July 2nd, 1776, but it's going to be formally ratified on July 4th, 1776. Of course, we celebrate our Independence Day on that day. And so again, all these men, I want to stress this, shared some role in drafting it. John Adams, in fact, actually kind of very famously defended the Declaration on the behalf of Jefferson on the floor of the kind of Second Continental Congress. He really adamantly defended it, was a champion of Jefferson's writing. Funny enough, Jefferson himself, while a great writer, kind of actually just sat on the sidelines, wasn't the most talkative guy, and so he let his buddy John Adams do most of the arguing, most of the talking, okay? And so it's going to be formally ratified July 4th, 1776. Here's a very famous portrait that was painted kind of the occasion. This was actually painted years after the fact. It wasn't actually contemporary to the time, but there we are. Here we have our Declaration of Independence. And I just want, these are words we've all heard, but I want us to really kind of stop and consider them, not just on the basis of the revolution, but for where we're going to be going as Americans, okay? We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Incredibly beautiful words, right? I mean, they're so ingrained in our identities as Americans that we look at proudly. And, I got an American flag behind me here. And when I hear these words, I'm almost driven to tears out of the beauty of these words. But one of the great contradictions of American history, and this is not just true of 1776, this was true of 1876, this will likely be true in 2076, is that how close are we to living up to these words? When it says all men are created equal, is that exactly true in 1776? I'll go ahead and spoil it for you. It's not, okay? This isn't, first of all, including half of the population, the gender of the United States, right? Women. That's not anywhere near what they're talking about, right? Certainly not African Americans, certainly not Native Americans. So this whole notion that all men are created equal, beautiful words, and that's really the key conflict moving forward, not just for this revolution, but for the rest of American history. When are we going to truly live up to these beautiful words? Because if we don't live up to these beautiful words, they're just that, they're words, right? But that's really the ongoing conflict. It's going on right now, I would say even, right? When will we live up to these words, these beautiful words that everyone is entitled to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness? Again, this goes beyond the revolution. I would say this is our kind of a key prompt or a key question that we've just now arrived to that will really take us through through the rest of American history, okay? When will we really live up to these beautiful words that Jefferson helped pen? Finally, though, and I made this meme last year, okay? Basically, America, we've sent our breakup text to Britain. I'm a head out, right? I even included a little kind of a tri-pointed hat there from the era. So, and if you're better at making memes than me, you feel free to take this and make a better one. You know what I mean? But again, this is the grand breakup text. This is us saying, sorry, Britain. Listen, we've had a great relationship over roughly 150 years, but it's time for a little something different. It's not you. It's not you. It's me. It is you, and we, the people, want to break away and do something different. Okay, so really, this is finally the point of no return. America is now saying, these United States of America, might I add, are saying, nope, we're ready to move on. We're ready for something different. Britain, on the other hand, are not going to let the colonies break away just so easily. And that's what the war is going to be all about. Can we maintain hold over these colonies? Or is the momentum for patriotism, the momentum for that beautiful notion of the United States of America, is that too strong at this point? As it turns out, it will be. Okay, so that's it for today. Last Ed Puzzle for the week. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. And as always, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. Take care.